Love you, Nick Lou. Thank you, guys. And I'm so proud of you. Have a good one. Mwah.
Yes, Tiffany, bringing that rhythm, that soul, that blues. I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, just show your love for Tiffany Good. If you like what you heard, you can check her out on none other than Bandcamp and Spotify. Her new debut album is Today Was a Good Day. I checked it out and it is fabulous. Give it up one more time for Tiffany Good. So good, so good, so good. Just filling our hearts with some soul. I'm your host today, Kalisa Ray. I am so honored to be here with Miss R.L. Lewis, the poetess. Just a little bit about our woman of the hour. So, some of you may know her as Dr. Nicole Lewis, that is the director of NC Central's Women's Center. But today she hails to us as none other than R.L. Lewis, the poetess. She is an administrator, an HR professional and mentor, a poet, mother, and author, hailing from none other than VA and Philly. But today she reads to us from the Triangle area. Tonight we're here to celebrate none other than her debut collection, Just Right. Just Right is a collection of poetry and stories that samples her early work featured in Yolanda Coleman's 2008 novel, Sugar Rush. R.L. Lewis's writing has been featured on podcasts such as Anchor and Black Girl Mentor, and she has a full-length collection called Her Story, the exploration of lived experience of the first female HBCU presidents. Her work will empower, inspire, and motivate. Welcome, the woman of the hour, the poetess, Miss R.L. Lewis, the poetess herself.
Thank you so much, Kalisa. Oh my gosh. I was like, is that me? First of all, I want to thank Tiffany, my big sister in Delta. Just amazing. Her album really has got me through the summer, my walks and everything. So I just want to thank her. I also want to take time before I get into the reading. I welcome you all. I'm so glad you're here to join me. I want to thank my publisher, Swiner Publishing. I want to thank Dasana Hanu, who has done my forward and also part of my production team tonight, is along with Church the Poet. I want to thank 303 Design. So when you all see the cover, that's who did the cover art. So it just sprung out of really a journal that one of my sister friends, who you'll meet a little bit later in the hour, gave to me as a wedding gift, and said to me, of all my friends who have stories to tell, yours is the one that I could see published one day. And so just thankful for that, and everyone. So I want to get right into this. I welcome you all. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate and am humbled by everyone who has reached out to me today. But I want to start with the dedication. So Just Right is a labor of love. It is a collection of stories that have occurred over the course of my adult life. But I think it's important. The real inspiration for this and for me telling the story has been a very special person. And so this book is dedicated to all the round brown girls and all the folks who didn't always think that they could or should trust the voice in their head, and to my very own beautiful, brilliant little brown girl who has so much gift inside. Here is to trusting that she will just live in confidence, remembering to also free herself, making life her stage. So if you'll indulge me, I'm going to do a couple pieces from the book, just to give you some idea about what's here and what you'll find when you make your purchase today. There are three types of sisters. A borderline basher. These women don't need a man, rarely have anything good to say about the brothers. They're very corporate at heart. Then there are kindergarten teachers. These women are kindergarten teachers at heart, sweet and gentle. Both men and women alike want to protect them and handle them with care. And then there's what I call the women in the middle. This is the group to which I fall. A careful blending of the two, professional in her approach, conscious but practical, appropriately tender, but people don't really know how to take her. She struggles between being a brother's rock and partner and his nurturing helpmate. Brothers therefore treat her like a borderline basher. This poem is in the voice of the mist in the middle. Unlike my other pieces that are usually specifically about one man or person, this poem is for the collective you. Sometimes you have to say it out loud. I have followed you from city to city, from fort to fort, and hood to hood. I've covered you in your shadow so that you know I had your back. I've watched you grow and melt and sink only to evaporate and soar higher the next time. I listened and cried and prayed and lied when it would benefit you. In war times and half times, I made sure you had something to eat and wear and laughter to share, and I gave you me with reservation, then hesitation, and then unconditionally. In my me time, I thought of ways to speak your love language. I even gave you my ocean. But you attempt to cower me and reduce me to I should know and question my seriousness and threaten me with, you don't know when you can come. You offer your time and ear the way that meets your schedule, but not the where, when, or way that meets my needs. You post up like you're so direct, yet you call my mother to connect, and you want me to figure out that that means you care? To them, you got it all together. To them, you're Mr. Man around town. Smile at them, suck your teeth at me. I washed your clothes. I paid your family court fee. I wiped your nose from the tears you were scared to cry. I know your fears, and I gave you my ocean. The fucking least you could do is be available to me and realize that sometimes I need some of that shit too. I hope that touched you. That's one of my favorites. It resonates. I wrote that in the mid 2000s. We'll go with that. So that piece again is for the collective you. That's a sampling from my chapter that's called All About the Hymns. This next piece that I want to share, my sister and I often find ourselves in the greeting card section, buying cards, looking for cards for our parents or for other people. And the cards don't always speak to the sentiment that we have or the experience that we have. And so several years ago, I began to create my own cards and our own messages to go to our parents and then to other people. And so there's a section in the book that's called Tell the Ones You Love. So with all the people I thanked in the beginning, the truth is she get it from our mama. So my mother has journaled, my mother has written. We're still waiting for her to get herself published. But I wanted to make sure, and I could not let this launch event go by because I know that the Silver Brigade is out there. But I want to make sure that she knows how much I care about her and that one of these pieces that I wrote for her in 2007 is in the book. And so I hope that this will touch you. I think that it speaks to many of us. This piece is entitled Daddy's Baby, Mama's Child. You loved me, whether I cried or I smiled, fat or thin, whether I cheered or I fought. You held me to your spirit and let me breathe you in. To others, I was a cute and mischievous baby. To you, I was a future rising. Your lessons were intuitive yet simple, promising yet precautious, molding yet modified. Like a moth drawn to a flame, you took in all I gave, all I had, and all I had left to be. You wouldn't let me falter, but you let me discover me. You took off the cloak of you as leader or teacher or student or wife, because that covering was made of pieces that could complete my quilt. While daddies tend to spoil us rotten, Mamas make you earn without guilt. Daddies teach you what love looks like. But mamas teach you how to give it and not lose your life. You wouldn't draw me the blueprint, but you walked me through the map. And when there were not enough towels to dry up my tears, you gave me the mama pat. So now as the tables are turning and daddy time is marking the tree, there is nothing I wouldn't do to help mama. Because mama, you always help me. Now, I'm in a lot of little groups, and Kalisa Ray gave me that wonderful, very polished and posh introduction. But I would be remiss in sharing and being vulnerable and giving you all my truths and the authentic me that is in our Lewis the Poetess if I didn't give you a little sassy, sultry. So there's a lot of this in here too, because pretty round brown girls are all things. This piece is entitled Mind Over Matter. I said I was saving it for marriage, and then I met you. I said I was going to hold it until I found the one who deserved it most. It seemed all I had to offer, all I had to share, and honestly, I thought I'd given it all away. Then you touched it. Like Tribe in 93, you massaged my ears with your tongue, softly strong, bringing me to an unintentional orgasm of the mind. You swiftly and not so meaningly, so cunningly, make me squirm as you perform cunnilingus on my thoughts. You move in and out and in, over and over again, whether early in the AM or long into the night. I often believe I'm done. Then you ring me and I'm open all over again, realizing I was restless because I was waiting for you to touch me. Miles and minutes mean nothing because when you do it, when you say the right things, it's like Solomon got a song on the radio and you so naturally hum the melody. You maneuver your tongue around the edges of my earlobe and ravish the orifice with that sweet, salty breath and sultry sound. I see for the first time my real beauty. The way you make it so smooth, so inviting, so lovely. I'm glad I didn't save it all for marriage. Because the more you talk to me, the more I hear your voice softly, strongly in my ear, the more infatuated you fall for me, just for me giving it to you. The more my imagination leaps with thoughts of our future first time, because our conversation is just so dope. And without it muddying our thing, I see that I really am pretty, which I guess I always was, but now I see it too. Good, we're going good, excellent. So, always, as I said, giving you a little bit of taste. This is just a sampling of what's in the poetry piece. And then I'll share with you a little bit of the story. So this last piece is actually just made it under the gun for my publishing deadline. I created this in a workshop that Dasana Hanu facilitated a few weeks ago. And it really is a precursor to what you'll end up hearing in the story. It is absolutely about my beautiful, brilliant little brown girl. So this piece, a little bit different for me, is called She Knows. Do you? About her blackness. She be of you and me. Been 12 years, 9 months, and 7 agonizing Groundhog Day debates over her being black enough and knowing it. She be of you, father whose father was key in the nation of black brother, city of brotherly love, fire set ablaze to equalize and serve his own. Be granddaughter, therefore, of nation child who got too much time for exhibiting black pride. She be fire baptized on Southern macaroni and hijab wearing Garden of Bilal. Nose bacon, turkey from up top and poke from down below. Be 2 steps down for the graduates of the All That High School on the All That campus on the darker side of the tracks of Tallahassee. Be 2 steps down for Madeira, who knows the first. Be 4 steps deep from school where Booker T learned to love. Be one step away from being fifth generation model of the Negro school. Be very clear her brush ain't like the others. Sings K-pop off key, but body been moving to Bob Marley, and her tush is round like Tosh made king cakes for her himself. He 4 steps down from the medicine man who be black and old gold and Freemason, where all the people from Frenchtown go to be healed. Is that not authentic enough, Simpleton? She be just southwest from them homes they bombed where journalists used his word, yet her root pushed up from the rubble of the place where they realized them niggas is literally living almost rent-free on top of all that oil. She rolls her eyes and pops her hips, holds time. Know and be outraged as she expresses outward in dance, theater, and culture. She knows the feel of tears when brown ones like her be dragged across classrooms for being assertive and knowing what they want to say, but saying it just too strong. She be watching sideways as each woman in her triangle show how to change the world summation of her, marching boldly in bright crimson. Yet there may be others who fly by, but it's very clear hers be the beta model and founder of a dynasty. She sees all shades of beauty and can identify all shades. So stop with this bullshit. She be of you and me, and we both be, by now, 100. And if my explanation is not good enough still, I can have her show you the math using core shells and yes. Thank you. So now I'm gonna get into it. I know you're like, what? Have we not gotten into it already? I want to share. So the book is comprised of chapters of poetry that gives a certain measure, a certain message that will touch something within you. But one of the things that's really important for me in my being obedient was to share my actual story. So I'm going to read a little excerpt from that. I can't do this. The words stumped me. See, I was there, but I kept holding back from fully engaging in the foreplay, not really coming out of anything. And then from deep in my soul, the words crossed my lips, and I heard myself say, I'm not her anymore. He tried all the words and sat on the edge of the bed and said, no, I like you. And I do want to see where this can go, but not like this. I'm not her anymore. And I knew it was okay, that here was this good, decent brother who wouldn't play me and all that, but I could see that this moment was so deeply the trap of the enemy. I knew that if I stayed in this moment, I'd be learning the same lesson over again. And I left. I left this beautifully naked man there and went to my godparents' house for the night, kissed my sleeping baby. It was the 1st of November, 2008. Things moved from there. Pastor Alan Waller was bringing a mighty word each Sunday. I was beginning to think he was tapping my phone. He launched into a series of sermons about pushing through and how not to give up. And I sensed that he must be under attack too. So when those sermons landed on my doorstep, I paid attention and I stored that word. And though being a working mom without a partner was still an adjustment I was making, I kept showing up for service with my whole stroller carrier combo intact. On New Year's Eve, going into 2009, he preached, the fight this year is just to get you ready for the fight to come. And I believed him. I was supposed to sit with my friend Deaconess Alethea Taylor and her sister, but I couldn't find them in the packed sanctuary, so I sat with strangers. Look at here. I worshiped like I was in my private prayer closet, and I cried. There were times when we do not realize that we need to not be seen so that we can only see him and hear his voice in us. As Pastor talked about the fight and getting my thank you cards ready to send to all those who made me fight, getting ready for the bigger fight next time, I cried some more and shed more tears. And then I made a list for my thank you card recipients in my head. I bought business card stationaries, templates, so that I could make my own business cards because I needed to begin professionally to network as me and not a representative of the health system. I made cards so that when I went to the CIAA, a major gathering of educational institutions and their corporate partners set around HBCU basketball, that I could network because I was moving. I remembered and embraced the work of my new client group because I knew the researchers were also faculty. So as much as I resented being given a client that wouldn't let me grow, I heard God say, there is a reason and your growth is not here. So I said, thank you. I decided to meet with another lawyer. I was preparing to get things in place just in case. This January lawyer that I met with was considering retaining told me that I couldn't move. She made many other statements, and even though I heard the words, my spirit seemed not to be bothered by it. Then at the turn of the season, in the spring of 2009, when Anna began her rotations at her dad's, I started packing. I started packing. I began with my closets. I cleaned out the closets and packed away winter clothes and Christmas stuff and purged. I did not have a job to go to. I just knew that I would not be seeing another winter or Christmas in Pennsylvania. I cleaned out the garage. I got rid of things I didn't need and hadn't used. I started taking things to consignment shops and Goodwill. And I started to document daily. Every time he visited, every time she went with him, every time I asked him to pick her up and he said no. Every time Terry or Corinne picked her up from daycare or watched her when she was sick and I couldn't take off. That January lawyer had told me to do that. It was stressful, but it was necessary. Even my village in the city, when I was venting, would just say, just write it down. I didn't care much for that lawyer because she was tough, but she was tough. I had actually called another lawyer who was referred to me through my EAP and had not gotten a call or response back. What was worth adding is that at the end of January, Savah got laid off. So when he was telling me no, there was no conflicting or competing work schedule. Also during this time, I was trying to come off this water pill. So I was working out, walking 4 miles a week. I was able to drop 5 pounds in 6 weeks and bring my blood pressure back down. But I knew in my spirit that I was moving. Oddly, I never got discouraged. I just knew change would come. A job at an HBCU in North Carolina where I was connected posted to an external job site. I emailed the Vice President of Student Affairs. I told him that I would be in town over the next couple of months and would love to sit down and talk with him about the position. In May, he invited me for an interview simply based on my credentials and not based on any connection. But in April, I went down to North Carolina for my grandmother's 85th birthday and started looking for houses and daycare. Pastor Waller, meanwhile, was heavy into Job and breaking down so many facets of that biblical chapter and book, but it was all around being faithful and lost and being tested and covered by God and holding on and remaining obedient. At that point in my experience, I could not help but to go back to that faithful night during homecoming weekend and knew that all things were working together towards something. Well, things went well at the interview. So I told Savah early in June of 2009 that I was considering moving. I was so nervous. I had a whole plan in place, where to tell him, what time of day. I went over the specific language, and I had a backup plan of text communications and alerts just in case it went south. What I did not know then was that what I in essence had was a safety plan. Later in my career, I would come to know fully the meaning of a safety plan. In writing this now, I realize in retrospect that I'd had one for a long time. And that meant that I had been in an abusive situation for a long time, albeit emotional. I just couldn't acknowledge it. Believing it gave it power. So we met in a public place for me to discuss the possibilities. I did not have to activate the safety plan based on the way that I set it up. He appeared composed and expressed awareness that he knew at some point I'd be looking for another career move. We met during my lunch break. He was still not working 6 months after being laid off. We parted. I went back to work and we maintained visitation and a routine interaction after that. 2 weeks later, I was served with papers for custody, asking for full custody. So if you want to know how the rest of that ends, and really how it began, you're gonna have to buy the book, which is on sale today through midnight. And then it'll go up a little bit, but you can still get it. So as we were planning and thinking through this virtual life, there's something that has come alive for me and really been instrumental in my personal life, but also then moves over into what I do and what I offer the young lady that I work with. So I want to say the very first time I ever wrote that story, I wrote the story in the journal that was given to me, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, by Shauna P., who was getting married. The first time that I shared this story out loud was in a sister circle that my bestie E started as a group of us were wading through singleness. It was a traveling circle at the time, and I read it when they came to visit me in North Carolina. So this real talk concept grew from this notion that Black and brown girls learn more lessons at the feet or at the kitchen table after Sunday dinner than they do in traditional classes or traditional spaces, just by ear hustling with grandmama and all those fast aunties have to say. When women get to just talking, it sparks other women to just breathe, just laugh, just cry, just write. Because they see that we all share the same stories, bad and not so bad, of bad and not so bad decisions. So what better for me to launch Just Right than to bring together, highlighting this collection of poetry and prose, a group of some very special sister friends of mine in our very own Real Talk. Ladies.
Yes, ma'am. Oh my goodness. So before we bring on the ladies for Real Talk, can I just say that I threw a book while I was listening to you? I got my wine. I'm over here sipping this champagne because, honey, yes, ma'am. I want to, before we invite the ladies to do the Real Talk conversation, to just encourage people after getting that gut punch from you, sister, to send their questions in the chat. So if you are listening right now, please send your questions to the chat as we kick off Real Talk. We're going to be talking about some juice, some spice, some vulnerability. And I want people to feel comfortable in sending any questions they have to you or the other ladies. And can I just tell you that I got some breaking news just now that Just Right was already listed as number 7 on Amazon's bestseller and new releases, honey. Yes to you. Yes to you. I tell you what, so if y'all have been impacted like I've been impacted, y'all need to buy that book and send over your questions. All right, ladies, come on, let's have this conversation.
Come on, girl.
Hey, hey.
So I said, hey, we got to get like a sampling. I believe in having sisters. I believe in having a council. And I have been really fortunate and blessed that in every pocket or pipeline in my life, there have been this gathering of women who come together to meet a need of each other, and certainly for me, differently, but then all the same. So every woman who is in a Real Talk tonight is really a sampling from all my different sister circles. And these women are certainly women that would be the ultimate in helping me to get vulnerable and to share with the people a little bit more about who Nick Luke really is.
I love it. So, okay, I got some questions for y'all, if y'all don't mind. So the first thing is, I want to know how all of you met, because from what I'm told, you're all scattered all over the U.S., living your lives, and are powerful, powerful women. So how did you all first meet?
So I'm gonna give you the rundown and give you their name, and to let the people know their name, and then they can, I'm sure, and will expand because they like to call me out. So I always start with Shauna. Shauna is my oldest continuous friend. We've been friends since we were 8 years old. Her godmother and my mother were high school friends. And after a while, my grandmother, I think, decided that summers in Tallahassee needed to include more than just she and my granddad. So they connected me with a friend. And so Sean and I started to hang out when I would go to visit when I was 8. And then we would continue to do that. And my grandmother would like to tell me that I couldn't boss Shauna around. And when we got to be 13, Shauna said I couldn't ball her around, and that solidified our friendship. But Shauna was an avid reader, so it's just so appropriate that she was also the first person who gave me the journal that then has launched this. So that's Shauna. That's timeline. And then Javanka, Joby. Joby is Joby and I started out as frenemies in high school over a boy. Now, not a boy we both liked, a boy who liked me and who I liked back, but was a special friend of hers. And she decided that I was too mature to date her friend. And then she realized that I wasn't what she thought I was. And as time went on, then we ended up connecting in a different way. Somebody called me to tell me one day, like, she's really cool. You can be friends with her. And and then we ended up at the same school. And through that time, really through college, is where we solidified our friendship. And then into adulthood, I'll let her tell you, it continues on today. Okay. And then there's Tasha. We call her West Bay. So as we go throughout, that's what we call her. West Bay and I met in sophomore year at Hampton in the economics class. We were the only two people in the class who understood what the professor was saying, and found it odd that these intellectual peers of ours seemed not to be smart enough to be able to understand English coming out of the professor's mouth. And that bluntness bonded us. And then we bounded through Delta. Now, sure that they want to say. So I'm gonna let them.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me all about it, ladies. Tell me about the journey, how you met, all of it.
Well, Nicole stole my thunder because it is true. She was bossy. Like, I tell anyone, she was like the bossiest friend. She's like, oh, like, you're 8. Why are you bossing me around like this? And what's funny is I would go to her grandmother's house, and her grandmother had all these original Nancy Drew books in her library. And I'd be like, oh, wait, I want to look at this. And Nicole would be like, you didn't come over here for this Nancy Drew. Come on and play these Barbies. We got to go. And I'd be like, just give me a little bit. And it's funny because we have sisters the same age. And so they thought, oh, this is a natural fit. But me and Nicole had it from the beginning. It's like, even as we were fussing about how long it took me to eat cantaloupe in the morning, that her grandmother would put out for us. But it's like, Nicole is my friend that I can go 2 months without talking to. I can go 2 years without hearing her voice. But as soon as we're back together, it's like, it's been 2 minutes. And she still is bossy. Now I give her a little bit like, okay, that's enough. But it's all love.
Well, I guess I had the second introduction. So Nicole and I, as she mentioned, we go really, really far back. As she said, we were frenemies. We just were from 2 different sides of town. You know, that phrase that they use, or they say, you know, being on different sides of the track. We just ran in 2 separate circles, actually. But she ended up liking, and they had a friendship relationship. They dated, and he was like a brother to me, and it just didn't seem like it fit. You know, she was bossy, she was mature, and I just thought, you know, initially in my mind, I thought she was older than us. You know, my little crew, we were the TLC hat to the back crew, and Nicole was Patti LaBelle Gladys Knight crew. Like, they were. I mean, they would be dressed to the nines going to the football game. You know, it just didn't. Well, you know, we're taking it back to what I thought about. And it just was, you know, she just seemed a lot more mature than she actually was. And so in those moments, I didn't think she fit my friend. You know, he's like a brother to me, and I didn't think she fit. And then college, we kind of got together, both went to the same college, had the opportunity to spend a large amount of time with her in several areas. We ended up being line sisters and pledged right along with West Bay. So we got very, very close. I see what my brother saw in her. It just took me a little longer than You know, at the
And
time,
he
you
was
know
older
that
than us. Let's be clear. He was older than both of us.
he was.
Yeah.
He was. So,
I told you,
but yeah,
his mama said he needed a little bit of coaching, so that's why he chose me. You know, he was
yeah.
like,
So Nicole was that culture, definitely. So, it's just, but it's true. It's just the very same as Shauna said. You know, we can have moments where, you know, we don't speak for a while. We will text, communicate, and it's just one of those things that, you know, that confirms the authenticity of a relationship when you can, you know, time can pass and y'all don't miss a beat, or when you do catch up, you're trying to get it all in like 2 hours and talking about families. And I have a daughter. My daughter and her daughter are similar in age as well. So it's, you know, it's been a long journey. I do remember just sitting here listening to her read. I know that story. Some, you know, pretty familiar with it, and it's amazing. It's just been a blessing that, you know, we've maintained the friendship, and she's persevered and made it through. So I am a part of that sister circle. We have some things we share. We keep it tight, keep it in the vault, and we continue our friendship. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm very, very proud of you, Nick.
thank you. And Joe and Joe is a fighter. I'm not really. I am in my own way. But Joe is a fighter. So when we need to get down and fight in something, like she is that. And she will bring that out of us. So I literally, her other girlfriend, I got in a car one day with 2 days notice and drove from Philly with a pit stop in Maryland all the way down to Birmingham when she needed to be like prim and proper. And I was going to be a little hood. And so I took my boots out, right, and had to straighten up some people for 24 hours, and then got back in the car and drove all the way back and did it all over again.
That's what friends are for. We play the roles we need to play in those moments. So yeah, that you sure did. Oh, you girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, with us, it was sophomore year at Hampton economics class. I was so glad to have someone in that class that could relate. It was pretty hard being the only person in there that could decipher what in the world that man was saying. And Nicole and I are very similar in that she's extremely bossy and I'm very direct. So on any given day, we will go at each other. But when it's all said and done, like Shauna and Joby said, whatever day it is, we just pick up where we left off and keep it pushing.
And Tasha wins. When we have to go, I just end up like, Like you do your big sister, like she can't tell me what to do. But then she does. So, but it's authentic. It's authentic.
So from what I've heard,
Who's louder than me. So I get to relax a little. Go ahead, Khaleesa. I'm sorry. What you got?
oh, you're fine. You're fine. So I was just gonna say something to Joey. So you were talking about how when you first met, she was dating a guy that at the time looked like she was almost like the cougar in the situation. So
Yeah.
what I want to ask y'all is I heard a little bit of, some dirt about something about wearing nightgowns at 13 or whatever, being young and silk caps and nightgowns. Can y'all tell me how Nicole was when she was younger? I need to know. I need the dirt. Let's dish. Tell me all the things.
Well, Shauna, go ahead, Shauna, you're muted if you wanted to tell. I think you had that story of when you recognized how Nicole would go to bed.
Yeah, it was freshman year, so we're all 18 in an all-girls dorm. Boys can't even come up there. And Nicole would come back from the shower, sashaying down the hall with like a silk nightgown and a matching robe. And it always matched. Like she only wore sets. And it's like, who does this except for grown women that are going to bed with somebody? Like, and the rest of us have on like t-shirts and shorts and all this. And Nicole was like, but that's her. Like she was mature at an early age.
I did.
And when I got married, I was like, you know what? It's time for me to really be like Nicole. Start wearing matching silk nightgowns and Oh,
And the thing is, they don't even require all that. Like now that we're in it, they don't require it. Like they'll be like, babe, I just want you to get a t-shirt and some panties. Like, but that was not like I just needed. I was a set wearing something, and it was the '90s, so I was definitely gonna have a color coordinated something. But that's yeah. And Joey played basketball, so you know she was in basketball shorts and the tank top on any given day. But I did. I always, even now, like
She
I go
did.
figuring out what my nightwear is. It might be a night shirt, but it's in the nightwear section, and it needs to have something. It needs to say something. I don't know. That just makes you feel pretty.
I want to know what y'all's relationship conversations are like. So you're talking about, still to this day, y'all keep in touch and talk about everything. Before we get into the nitty gritty of when the beginning of your story starts, right? I want to know a little more about what your relationship conversations were like. Like, what did y'all tell her about this guy, or any relationship advice you gave her? Like, child, you need to cut him off. Stop talking. Whatever. I want to know what advice y'all give her and what your conversations look like.
You see how they're silent? They're silent because nobody ever said you should cut him off. Now, Shauna might be like, that's bullshit. Like, okay, like, whatever. Right. Javanka would say, what is it that you want? What are the things that you want? And as time went on, those things became very finite.
Yeah, I think we each probably, weren't as probably. I'm direct, but when it came time to other people's relationships, I think you have to be careful. I don't think that's just something where you start bashing anybody's boyfriend, husband, spouse, whatever. I still think that you have boundaries. I just think for me, I just used to try to get her to reflect on, okay, Lana, is this making sense? Like, is this what you want? And so really just trying to get her. To definitely not beat herself up, to make sure that, she understood her own value and to prioritize herself. So I didn't really bash him directly to her. It was just kind of one of those things where you would just kind of be like, oh, she need to get out of that. But I wouldn't directly just tell her that, my concern was for her well-being. So I wasn't really, on the attack at the time.
Tasha said, and there were times when Tasha said something and I couldn't see, and we didn't talk for a little while. Like that would be like, because there's a foursome of us too.
Yeah, but I think Joby hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, at that point, when you're in it, you got to let that person get to the point where they can see it for themselves. So regardless of what I said, at the risk of our relationship, it wasn't until you'd had enough to where you decided to do something about it. So for me, it was primarily, what do you need? What do you need me to do at the end of the day? And that's how that came about.
And then Shauna might pop in. It may be years. We may have a conversation. Now, understand, Kalisa, right? The total book, like all the poetry, spans a segment of people in my life. Okay. So I would say in my adult life, I had 4 long-term-ish relationships. I had some that would be like weekend, if we come here, like that's a steady over there. My mother at some point said that I had a trilogy. She was like, there's these 3 names that just keep coming up. That's a while ago. So I will be with somebody for a while. And then the other piece is like Tasha and I have had conversations about, do you want to be married or do you want a partner who is this? And so we do have those level of conversations. Do you want kids? Do you not? What would be okay?
Yeah.
Shauna, what you got? I don't even. I see you kind of smile, so I don't want.
I just was like, no, I agree with everybody else. Like, you're the bossy one, so we can't boss you to say get out of a relationship, and that's not what a real friend really does. You have to find that for yourself, and you just have to be there. But I will admit that I was one who's like, what are you doing? You never wanted to be married. Why are you sitting here like sticking in something, trying to get to a certain point? Like, let's, at a certain point, come on. you can do this and let's move on. But it took a while to get there, and it was when I could see she was there, right? And she was ready to hear that kind of conversation.
Yeah. And Nicole, didn't you say to one of them you always knew that you really just wanted to have a child, and it wasn't really about for you the relationship, it was more so you knew in your heart that you really wanted to have a child?
Right. Like right now, when you're giving my father a heart attack and my mother is clutching her pearls. Yes. When I was 19, I said, hey, I could be okay with not being a wife, but I could not be okay not being a mother. But I will also put that in context. So it wasn't until I was 27, 28 that I said, you know what? I really do think I want a partner, right? I still wasn't always sold that it would be a husband, but I wanted a partner where I was his only and he was committed and we were, and then as I got older, like, and he did all the things. He has to do all the things. But so that was later. So I wasn't like some of my other friends or like Black people in Black romantic comedies who were chasing marriage at 22, 23, 24. I wasn't, because, but even that was from a place of pain, right? So at 19, I had seen my parents be divorced. By the time I was 21, I had seen my mother lose a husband to divorce and also lose a husband to death. And so I was like, oh, I can just shield and not have any of that. I can be selective and do what I want, have a good time, and at some point maybe have, but I did. Shauna is right. And at the time I was 19, I knew who the father of that child was going to be. It's not who ended up being the father of this child. But
Who did you tell first when you first found out? What was the first conversation like?
Who did I tell first in my friend group?
Yeah.
Well, there were about 16 of them that got an email.
What?
And they got an email, and the email subject was okay. And so I said, okay, like, I got pregnant. You know whose it is. I'm now excited about it. We don't need to be excited about it. And if you can't be happy, or you're reading this email thinking, why would she get pregnant by him, then you can just not be my friend. It was a very dark. I wasn't far along. I don't know. I was 2 months pregnant before I knew I was pregnant. So I was at least like at the 3 month, 4-ish month mark.
Joby, Shauna, and Tasha, what were y'all thinking when y'all got this email? Like, she sent you an email about being pregnant. What were y'all thinking?
It was a lot. It was just heavy. It was heavy. And when she just mentioned her escape plan or safety plan, that resonated, because I remember that conversation. So it was deep, you know what I mean? But that's Nicole. Nicole's, pretty deep. And that's what I remember. I just remember that it was deep, and I knew she was processing a lot, and trying, especially when it came time to being viewed, how she was being viewed at work, and, how people were going to view her. So I just remember those were things that were important to her. That's what I remember.
Yeah, for me, I booked a plane ticket. Me and another one of our friends, we needed to go make sure that she was all right. Because she was in denial and didn't want to acknowledge that, to get an email, a pretty lengthy email at that, in the middle of the night. I needed to lay eyes on her and make sure that she was all right.
And then I had a girlfriend at the time, so there were.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead, Sean P. I had a girlfriend who at the time was trying to.
Go ahead.
She and her husband were trying to get pregnant, and so she was in a place. So I emailed these 16. There was another person who I said had texted and said, "I'm sending you this email. So and so is not on it, because I need to be okay before I share with her that they've been on this journey. They now have two wonderful, beautiful kids, and there's that might be in story number two. But that was, Joby's right. Now, Joby was so gentle in her response to me. The next morning, midday, She called me after getting the email and she said, if I wasn't 8 months pregnant, I would drive to Philadelphia and punch you in your throat. That was the loving way that she jolted me into whatever reality was coming next. She just timed that way, you know.
So was your job on this conversation? Like, what was that like? Was there fear in you about like, what is my job gonna think? And how am I gonna juggle a new baby and my career? And because at the time you were a career woman, you were climbing the ladder. What was that like?
So Tasha will laugh at this. I have this notion of who Nicole Lewis is, and sometimes I refer to her in third person. And so in my mind, Nicole Lewis didn't have a baby and she wasn't married. Nicole Lewis at the time was the daughter of a college president and a host of retired educators and good Southern roots and knew all these things. And so now, granted, we all got family secrets. All the people in my family who were over 80 at the time, there were about 4 or 5 of them, when they called me and I told them, they were like, what are you gonna do? And then over 80, that means, are you getting married? And I was like, I'm gonna have a baby. Like, well, I'm not doing anything just because of that. At work, I wasn't as concerned. I just didn't want to have that conversation. So I remember being at work. I was well into the pregnancy, but I hid it at work. Nobody knew at work for like 6 months. I had some complications, and it was only because I had those complications, but I'm short. So just like right now in this camera, you can't see the lower half of me. So when I sat at my desk, nobody could tell. And I just wore, it was 2007. And so I wore a lot of ponchos and I was already heavy. So I just kind of masked as best I could. That's why when Tasha says they booked a plane ticket, she will tell you I didn't even buy maternity clothes. I was really in denial.
Yeah, there were no maternity clothes. We had to take her shopping and force her to buy maternity clothes and stuff for the baby. Then we got on the plane and we left and everything was okay.
Well, right.
Wow.
I wasn't even going to put her in it. She was going to be in the office. I wasn't even going to give up the second bedroom in the house. So that was that. There was a time I was having lunch with my colleagues, and it was a number of us doing human resources. So I knew they couldn't do nothing. I mean, I knew I had all kind of protections. But I was eating, literally, I was at the end of the table like this, and one of my colleagues said like, oh, and so I knew that this white man was processing because he also had a mold of who Nicole Lewis was. And I wasn't what he believed Black women were necessarily. So when he said this, I was like, oh, that's a narrative that was in your mind. So he said, yeah, Nicole, I can't wait to meet your husband. And without missing a beat, I was like, yeah, me too. And it just he didn't really know where to go from there. Yeah. But that was so there was this, what will people say? I knew that I had a support system in my friend circle that was in Philly, but I also didn't want to burden them. So that became heavy after over time. And I talk about that in the story. So when I talk about with Terry and Corinne, look here. My daughter knew Terry's voice better than her dad's voice when she came into the world because she was with me so much. She would pick me up and take me places when it was winter because my daughter was born in the winter. So when I couldn't go, Terry and Corinne became. Some people thought me and Corinne might be in a relationship because she took care of my baby so much. Like it was just because he was intentionally not available.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, for the people that are listening, before we wrap up, there are some questions, but I want to know what led you to be empowered enough to not just leave, but then even take the next step and say, I want to write about this. So there's one thing to say, I'm going to pick up and I'm going to leave this situation, but that's a huge move for you to say, I'm going to give this story to the world. Like, I would just love to know what did it take for you to make that decision? So
the move just came. Faith. I'm gonna say like faith. When I talk about this excerpt I read, I really was, and I always have. So I've had relationship, not religion, for a long time. I very much believe we get struggles that break us, but I also think that every storm isn't always bad. Some storms are to clear out. Some things are shock value to your system to make you pay attention. So I was no longer in a committed relationship with Savah by the time my daughter was born.
Mm.
A lot of the behavior that was simmering over that 7-year period that we were on and off again just became magnified during my pregnancy, and then as soon as she was born, right? So it really was faith, and I talk about it in the story, but it really was, I'm just going to be centered. I'm going to be quiet. I decided I wasn't going to have sex, so I didn't have sex for like a year or two on purpose, so that I could make sure that the voice that I was hearing was mine or his, right? And so that I wasn't making any decisions about that. The writing one night late, and once I had moved to North Carolina, I couldn't sleep. And an old coworker who used to say, like, when you're awakened at 3 o'clock in the morning, like that's a message that you need to be paying attention to. And I literally started writing. I just wrote everything down that I remembered until I became exhausted and I felt like it was all there. And it sat. And that sat for probably like 2010, 11. And then one Mother's Day, I was visiting a church. The first lady of the church asked all the single mothers, because I think she must have been a single mother before they got married. She asked all the single mothers, she was like, I'm not dishonoring the other mothers, but all of the single mothers, all those mothers without partners, I want you to come down. And I literally stood up, and this is no lie, I thought I was the only person who walked to the front of the church. I didn't even see anybody else moving. So when I got up there and finally kind of looked, I'm like, oh, but when I walked, it was just me. And she started saying, like, you have this and you have this. And she said, you have a story that somebody needs to hear. And then I sat on it for a while. And I ended up sharing it at some point with Deshaun. Deshaun was like, the person who's you, Dr. So-and-so in the making, doesn't have a story like this. And so people need to understand that even folks who do come from privilege, who are 5th generation this or 4th generation that, these things can happen, who have loving parents, who have a strong support system. You can still find yourself in this faith. And faith, at the end of the day, strips us all from all of it. So that's what really was being obedient. And I think that there were things that aren't happening for me or weren't happening for me because I hadn't been obedient yet in telling the story. The poetry had been therapy all along, which is why I have to read it, because I never memorized it, because writing it gets it out. So I don't keep it anymore.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So I just want to know from Joby, Shauna, and Tasha, y'all are her rock and have been since the beginning. Can you give anybody with last thoughts about what as brown women can we do? What makes a lasting friendship? Let's leave in that on a final note. What do you believe makes a lasting friendship? What's the
I would say authenticity. I think the opportunity to be yourself at all times, with people who really know you, who know you're good, you're bad, you're ugly, know your family, and that are able to, you can just be yourself at all times, not having to have a version 2. I think we all have, we're version 2 at work and where we are. I think to, like you said, distance, time, space, nothing will change that, those things that are authentic to your relationship. So for me, I think it's been the ability to just be, to be 100 all the time, and say it like she said, I'll bush in the face if I could, to say that and her understand that, I'm telling you this because I love you and I don't hear the person that I know in this moment. So for me, it's authenticity. I think that's what has allowed us to stay strong and tight for so long.
I love it. Tasha, Shauna, what do y'all think?
For me, it's be unapologetic, be you, and do it your way, and don't care what others may think or what others may say. You get one life to live, make it yours.
I think it's, be courageous. It's kind of the combination. It feels like it's the theme, but I think being courageous and understanding that you're good enough, being yourself and sharing who you are and your authentic self, and we all are. And having the courage to sit in that and want someone who wants that from you and who accepts that, the person that accepts all of you, I think is amazing.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Well, I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Nicole. This was great. Thank you, ladies, so much for just allowing me to host the Real Talk. I know, Nicole, I'm so jealous that I've never been allowed to be able to be a part of your Real Talks in the past. I hope I'm present at the next one. This was so great. It was so great to hear you read, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, girls. I just love y'all. I just want to say again, it is not of me that I share these stories. It is really so that there are other women who are out there. And I understand that not everybody has the benefit of having these kinds of friendships. We're 20, 30 years into these friendships. But I work with young women every day who are just at the start. And so I see the mixing and the matching, and I see the mismatching. And so just to be able to have 3 different circles that whenever I need to, you all are there. It's been fantastic. This story, I hope, really does reach and touch so many of you. It's a short story, but it's my story, and it speaks volumes about so many things. Faith is there. Lust is there. Calling back to yourself is there. Identifying who you are is there. Working and doing, even in the midst of the storm and the struggle, is there, which is one of the things that Dr. Chapman talks about often. Like, we're still gonna do it. We know that struggle is right there, but we have to continue to live. We have to continue to laugh. We have to continue to share. And so Just Right is that. Just Right is that collection that says there's something in here for everybody. And what I'll share, if you end up buying the paper book, you also have your own prompt. So there are sections in the paper book that is free so that you can begin to journal. I had no intention of telling this story to anybody ever. I just had to get it out of me. And because I was obedient in that, I continue to be obedient in sharing. And now we're going to do whatever comes next. So, I'm always available for a Real Talk. I'm always available to come talk. First time I ever wrote a poem was in the 10th grade. Shout out to Janet Bailey, Bethel High School. And we had to do a poem that was about us. And so that was the first time I ever wrote. And I was like, I kind of like this. And there's a way and there's a message. And so I often have thought, what if somebody picked up a book with poems in it that I wrote, and that became the center of high school or middle school or Sister Circle for Kids camp. So it is available on Amazon right now. It has been all day. It will continue to be. It is on sale today until 11:59 in both ebook and paperback. So Amazon and Kindle. Again, I could not have gotten this done, pandemic notwithstanding, without Swanner Publishing. So it's an amazing team. If you all are thinking about publishing, you got something, you right there, just do it. Take the things you have and do something with it. Thank you again, Desan Church, Kalisa Ray. Thank you, 303 Designs. Thank you to my sister friends, and thank you to my big sister, Tiffany Good, for her amazing talent in sharing. I love you all. Go get the book right now, Just Right by N.R. Lewis, the poetess. Thank you. Good night.